Yo, hello. So today's episode is titled Specialization in Sport, Position, and Training. Obviously, and always as it relates to baseball, we're going to talk about, some pretty important things, and some stuff has been out in the media recently over the last couple of years about, specializing in a specific sport at an early age or concentrating on a certain position, within the sport, and then tying that all into, training, throughout the calendar year, and how are we supposed to focus our time, energy, and resource into, ultimately achieving improvement and accelerating our development. How do we do that with other options throughout the year for our young prospective athlete? So the first thing I'll say is, and I think a lot of us might be familiar now with some of the stories we've heard in some of the higher profile people that have spoke up on the behalf of the youth sport, movement. And we've heard a couple people, for example, like Urban Meyer. Okay, Urban Meyer is one of the best college football coaches in the country, very well respected. And it's come out that he recruits, almost 90% of his recruits at Ohio State for the football program are multiple sport athletes in high school. And then it'll go on to say, how they should be doing more things throughout the year, and it enhances their overall athleticism and so on. And certainly on the surface that sounds brilliant, and a lot of people have bought into that. And a lot of people start saying, yeah, well, if Urban Meyer says so, then it must be good. And then baseball specifically, in recent years, we've heard John Smoltz in his Hall of Fame acceptance speech, talked about, the injuries with the throwing and the Tommy John surgeries at ages of 14, 15, and 16, and how it's unacceptable and how we can avoid them by, amping down the amount of games we're playing and how many competitive throws a pitcher may be throwing throughout the course of the year, and then kind of, categorizing that as, hey, well, why don't you just go play other sports throughout other parts of the year, when it's not baseball season. So good point. Kind of like I kind of compare it to eye candy, it kind of woos over, almost everybody when you hear or see articles written on behalf or hear firsthand someone like Urban Meyer or John Smoltz speak of what they believe. And I'm not calling them out as, they're wrong, because there's an ounce of truth for sure, and maybe a little more in what they're saying. But just to elaborate a little more, and then, if you are a parent or a prospective high-level athlete growing up, and you're thinking about how to approach your 12-month calendar in training and preparation, and you have to. I want to kind of shed some light on the whole, the big picture. Again, going back to that the big picture. There's always a big picture, and in my opinion, let's just take the Urban Meyer Ohio State football case, where an article came out that said that he's recruiting almost a 90%. His football recruiting classes at Ohio State are 90% multiple sport athletes in high school. So I think we're kidding ourselves if we believe that he's literally hitting the road with him and his staff, and they're not recruiting anybody but multiple sport athletes. And if you don't play other sports, you're not being recruited by Ohio State. I think that's ridiculous to think that, because that's certainly not how they're approaching it. I think it just so happens to be the case that when they're recruiting and they go over the profiles of all their recruits, they're finding out that, hey, this kid plays basketball, this kid plays baseball, this kid's track and field, soccer, whatever. And then they kind of looked at it, caught the eye, caught the attention, and then they've kind of brought it, public that's what they were doing there. So, how I would explain that is, if you took every player on the Ohio State football team, they are such top-level athletes. I mean, literally like world class, right? One of the top programs in the country year in, year out. And if you took anybody on that roster, 90% of them, 95 or more percent of these guys would clearly accelerate in more than one sport in high school, if not 3 sports or 4 sports in high school. So you tell me that, the wide receiving core and defensive back core at Ohio State wouldn't be, state champions in track and field, basketball, baseball. Of course they would, because they're elite athletes. So I think that's kind of, the public's kind of taken that out of perspective, and you see it being thrown around on social media that, hey, look at Urban Meyer's out recruiting only multiple sport athletes. And again, my personal stance on it is, it's just the way it's played out. There is no way Urban Meyer's out there saying, well, we're recruiting this kid, in California, and we're not going to show up unless he plays multiple sports. No. At the end of the day, it's about sport-specific production, projection, how they're going to fit into the system, sport-specific. And he's in the football business, so his specific sport is football. So at the end of the day, that's what they're going to care about. And I think it's kind of gained some steam where people, parents, players might look and read an article about, wow, Urban Meyer's recruiting 90% of his recruiting classes, multiple sport athletes. And I think it's kind of wishy-washy. I don't believe that to be, their objective over there. I think this just so happens to be that, obviously, when you're recruiting the best football players in the country, of course they could dominate at the high school level in more than 2 sports, for sure. Give me a bunch of the Ohio State linemen and tell me I can't have, state champions in wrestling, shot put, whatever. Pick a sport in high school. They'll be dominating because physically, athletically, they're superior. So I don't buy into that necessarily. And the other one that's gotten some attention is John Smoltz, Hall of Fame pitcher, great career, phenomenal athlete, and he's in his Hall of Fame acceptance speech, he's really frowned upon, how much youth baseball players are throwing, and it's causing Tommy John surgery. And Tommy John surgery was once unheard of, and now it's become, you know, kind of a normalcy in the game where it's almost expected at some point if you're a high-level pitcher. But what he's saying is kids are throwing the baseball in a competitive manner too often throughout the year. And competitive throws, which means you have a kid throwing a ball with the intention of throwing it as hard as he can, whether he be playing shortstop or pitcher or catcher or whatever. And those throws are adding up to damage in the arm. And that is very true. So he's very, he's correct on that point. And I think he references like this whole competitive throw thing, which means, again, these kids are throwing the ball as hard as they can throughout games and practices throughout the year, and the cumulative activity is just causing damage to the arm. So that's, I'd be willing to say that's a fact. So he's right there. And then I think where people are steering off the road a little bit with that is they're saying, well, this is a situation, the overusage, that, hey, go play other sports. So if Smoltz is saying, hey, you're creating damage to your arm, go play other sports. Or if Urban Meyer is saying, hey, go play other sports because that's producing some better caliber athlete at the end of the day that we want. And that's what I kind of argue with is that fact. Because whether it's Urban Meyer or John Smoltz or anybody else that speaks up on that, let's take these two guys, for example. These are elite of the elite of the elite. I mean, John Smoltz, for example, is a tremendous athlete. I mean, this guy probably could have played professionally in multiple sports. I know now he's a tremendous golfer. He's got size. He's a great athlete. He was probably a tremendous basketball player, amateurly and whatever. So, here you have a guy in the top, 1% of athlete that's ever lived. Forget about sports specific, athletically gifted, right? So he can throw a baseball 100 miles an hour. He can, do any sport you ask, very high level. But even himself found that at a certain age, whether it was the draft or somebody signing him or offering him money or offering him a professional contract, he realized that he was, he better go in this direction. That this was his bread and butter. This is what he was best at. And I think that's what some of these guys are losing perspective a little bit, as when you figure out what you're best at, it's important to concentrate on that and throw all your resources, time, and energy into that. Now, the point that's arguable, so having just said that, that shouldn't be arguable. But the point that is arguable is how you go about your training and specializing in your position athletically, all the different types of training that you can do, or what you should be filling your time with in certain parts of the year. That's arguable. For example, if I have some really good athlete who's a tremendous baseball player, and let's just say he's 16 years old, so maybe he's a sophomore or junior in high school, and he's a tremendous baseball player and athlete, and if I'm advising him or training him, or I'm a mentor of his, or I'm a coach of his, and he's clearly cut out to play baseball at the next level. Do I want him playing basketball in the winter? Or do I want him training with a high-level coach, trainer, mentor that's going to work with him on his pitch selection and his ability to recognize off-speed pitches. And, something of that type of importance in the game of baseball for a position player. Let's just throw out pitch selection. Basically the deciding factor of who becomes one of the world's greats or goods or professionals and who doesn't. Pitch selection, okay? You swing at more strikes, you have more success. You take more balls, you have more success. Any other combination there doesn't necessarily work. So do I want that kid in high school who's a really good baseball player that can play at the next level? Do I want him playing basketball in the winter or figuring out how to lay off a 3-2 curveball in the dirt? I want him learning about pitch recognition, which will lead to good pitch selection, which will enhance his overall approach at the plate and make him become a much better baseball player in general, okay? So I'm not wearing his body down. I'm not putting that extra wear and tear on his body, on his joints, which basketball tends to do. And I'm not knocking basketball. I'm just giving you an example. Or do I want that kid playing football? When he has, he's not going to play at a high level of football after high school. I mean, we've already said that, okay, baseball is your sport. You're 16 years old. We know this. So how do we tackle the other 10, 9, 8 months out of the year when we're not in season? How do we go about training and preparing our body and learning and accelerating that curve in those months when we're not in season? Okay, so if your season is 2 months or 3 months or whatever in the spring season for high school baseball, and then obviously summer is very important too. So it ends up that your in-game season might be 5, 6, 7 months, and then you have these other 4 or 5 months, 6 months. Should I go play basketball? No, I'd rather have you working on pitch recognition and pitch selection. Or if you're a pitcher, and speaking of throwing, where we can do grind and damage on our arm, the more competitive pitches we're throwing. I agree with that. But maybe I'd rather have you in, swim classes or yoga classes, than go play soccer or football. When I know you're not going to play college soccer, and I know you're not going to play college football. So let's keep it relevant to what we need to work on that's going to help you with baseball the most. So playing football is not helping you with baseball. Playing basketball is not helping you with baseball. And having just said that, you could say, well, what about the aerobic activity and the footwork and the explosiveness and the conditioning and all this stuff that they might be getting from a different sport? I get it. I understand. I mean, it certainly doesn't hurt. It's better than sitting on the couch, right? But what I'm saying is this whole movement where go play another sport will not necessarily competitively. That doesn't mean go sign up for the high school other sport team. Like I said, like yoga, stretching, flexibility, range of motion, forget it right now. That is the best. If I had a sport-specific baseball player that I knew could play at the next level in high school right now and could play in college or was going to be drafted, for me, it's all about the mental side of the game. It's all about something like yoga, like swimming. I want to get him in these activities, not competitively, but I want him to learn about them and put his body through it. And he'll train and he'll work out and he'll lift weights and he'll do speed training. But I'd rather have him do speed training with a high-level former, either baseball player or track and field or something like that. I'd rather have him do some sort of personalized training than go sign up for track and field. where the coaches are just looking at him as like, well, here's the best athlete in school, so let's just throw him out there and try to win some trophies, because that's ridiculous. It's not enhancing that individual's long-term goal that we already know is his baseball career. So it's a big, I've heard it a lot. I've thought about it a lot, and that's just the way I see it. Now, let's rewind to these young kids. Let's just assume that you start out in a sport at 6 years old. That's usually the first time a parent will sign their kid up for soccer or baseball and basketball, maybe somewhere 6, 7 years old, whatever sport it is. And that's awesome. And at 7, you should be doing the same thing, 8, 9, 10. My opinion is that the years 6 to 14. So from the first time you sign up for a sport, let's call it 6 years old, to the time you walk in to your first day of high school, let's call it 14 years old. So there's 8-year window right there. Play everything if you're good enough. I shouldn't say play everything if you're good enough all the time. I should say at the earlier stages, try. So there's the key word. Try everything. Make your whole calendar year. Well, he plays soccer here. He plays basketball here. He plays football here. He plays baseball here. And this is what we do. Awesome. If you're 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then, kind of like after 12, the whole 13, 14 stage is, a little bit delicate. You're starting to see, it's starting to come out, it's starting to show. You're starting to say, wow, this kid's got something in this sport specific. But definitely by the time you enter high school, you should be focused and centered on what you're good at. And this might not be everybody, because not everybody's going to be good or elite or have the ability to play in college or beyond after high school in one sport. But if you do fall in that category, okay, start to specialize in what you're good at. And there's nothing wrong with that. Because most guys like me that train and teach, or most coaches that have been around a while and seen a lot of talent, recruiters, scouts, it's very easy to see by the time a kid's 15 or 16 if he's going to be able to play at the next level. Remember, that's only 2 or 3 years away. So it's fairly simple to say, something about you in that sport. You're better. You're better in that sport, And there's nothing wrong with specializing in what you're best at. And then here's where the public perception strays, right? They think that you got to play other sports throughout the year because what you're good at, in this case baseball, is putting too much wear and tear on your body, and it's not enhancing your athleticism by what? Sitting around playing baseball? Well, for your information, we're not sitting around playing baseball. I mean, the top youth amateur players now, they're getting specialized training to enhance their baseball. And that might be yoga classes. That might be swimming. That might be training in speed, acceleration, strength training. Okay? But nowhere in there was, signing up and throwing on a uniform and playing for the local team in basketball, football, soccer, track and field. My point is you shouldn't run out to go compete in another sport just because Urban Meyer or John Smoltz says go play other sports throughout the year. I don't believe that. I think it's being misunderstood by a lot of the public, parents and players. What I believe is when you get to a certain age in high school at some point, and when you define that you're much better at this sport, let's say baseball, than you are the other sports, your calendar throughout the year should be filled up with how do I become the best baseball player? Okay? So instead of signing up for the basketball team, I'll just go train speed and strength, explosiveness, and I'll do plyometrics and resistance training, flexibility, range of motion with somebody in time. I don't have to go sign up for basketball, right? And if I can find somebody that can do that with a baseball background, forget it. That's the best. That's where you want to be. And it took me a while to realize that, and I implemented a lot at my gym, and that's kind of how I built the gym, was with that in mind. We're not just going to sit here and hit baseballs and throw baseballs all day. We're going to work on our balance, body control, reaction, speed, strength, flexibility, all that stuff. And you want to be in that setting. You don't have to be. Why would I want to be on the basketball team if I'm not that good in basketball? What, just to say I played high school basketball? That's unfair. That's not right. So, is it okay to specialize in the sport that you're best in? Absolutely. But wait until you're a little bit older and you've already figured it out. You know, time will tell, as they say. You'll know by the time you're a sophomore in high school. That's what I'll say about that. Freshman, by the time you enter high school, yeah, you're going to encounter some really freak athletes that can do it all. But still, if you ask professional evaluators and recruiters and scouts, they'll tell you, oh, yeah, this guy's obviously, a baseball player or a football player, and then start to specialize in that sport. So I think we've kind of, talked about that a lot, and I don't mean to, I totally see the whole, I'm not knocking Urban Meyer or John Smoltz in any way, because there's truth to what the evidence says. But like I said, Urban Meyer's not declining the best football players in the country if they don't play multiple sports in high school. He is taking them. It just so happens to be he's recruiting the best athletes in the country, and they're good enough athletes to play 5 sports in high school if you told them to, because that's what elite athletes can do. And Smoltz is talking more on the pitching side of arm injuries and competitive throws and how that deteriorates the arm and adds to injury at a younger age. And he's exactly right. But I don't want to just harp on kids to go play other sports. If baseball is their primary sport and their future, I want them focusing and enhancing their skills in other arenas that's going to help them with their sport-specific future, right? So it's important to identify what your future is and what you want to attack. So to elaborate further and get a little more back into the baseball world is specialization in position play. So often we're hearing, so-and-so's a pitcher only. And what I see now, it's kind of funny, is, people kind of peg 12-year-olds now as pitchers only. And, 12-year-old club teams have pitching staffs, and the kids don't hit. Or, kids are being told at a really young age that, oh, you're a pitcher. or you can't pitch and you're a catcher or a first baseman, and that's it. So just to kind of clarify on that, you can't peg or pigeonhole a kid who's 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 or 12 or 13 or 14. We talked about it. Once they enter high school, it starts to shed light on the situation, and the reality tells you where you need to put your time, energy, and focus and resources. So obviously you're going to have your higher end baseball players stand out. Let's just use for an example that the best player on the team is going to play shortstop and bat third in the lineup, or play center field or catch. Generally those are kind of those positions up the middle of the field: catcher, shortstop, center field, that are considered the best players on the team. So generally you'll see, you go to a 10-year-old game, the best player is probably the catcher, shortstop, or center fielder. And that's fine. And the reason that is because it's the middle of the field. There's more action there. There's more responsibility in the position play. So what happens is your best baseball players tend to catch, play shortstop, play center field. And then they do that for so many years, they've never played anywhere else. And then they get to the higher level and they're told, well, we want you to play third or second, or left or right, or first. And then they haven't had that experience. And it kind of sets them back a little bit when they get to the higher level that they're seeking, and they're told that, they got to play a different position, which is the reality. And it's most likely going to happen for most kids. So I'm a believer in getting the kids experience at different positions. Now, I'm not going to go overboard and say, hey, every inning we got to rotate spots. I think that's a little bit overkill. But I want my athletes to learn how to play the infield. I want my athletes to learn how to play the outfield. Catching's kind of a little different beast. You always only got like 1 or 2 kids that are willing to even put the gear on and catch, and that's awesome. Catchers are like their own little different breed, and if you've got a catcher at a young age, that's special. And there's something there. I can't really even explain it, because I wasn't a catcher. I was never interested. It wasn't enticing to me. But I mean, if you have a 8 or 9-year-old, 10-year-old that loves putting the gear on and getting back there and catching, that's special, and that tells you a lot. Not that he should be pigeonholed into only catching, but there's something there. He likes that. It's a little different breed, and he should pursue it. I kind of explain in a simple way, the baseball diamond, the defensive positions and sport and baseball specific positioning as this. So if you have a strong arm and good hands and good feet, you can play in the infield. When your arm doesn't become good enough, you got to play the right side of the infield. When you don't have the feet, you're moved to the corners, first and third. When you don't have the hands, you're moved to the outfield. So defensively on a diamond, I can categorize defense as hands, feet, and arm strength. So hands, feet, and arm strength. So essentially, if you give me the guy with the best hands, footwork, and arm strength, there's your shortstop. Hands and arm strength, but his feet aren't as good, there's my third baseman. Hands and feet, but no arm, there's my second baseman. No feet, no arm, there's my first baseman. And then obviously no hands, there's my outfield. And not to sound harsh, and not to say outfielders aren't awesome athletes, the best baseball players in the world, a lot of them are outfielders. But there's a specific, equation you're looking for in the infield. And that's that combination. Whether it's he's got one of them, two of them, or three of them, you better have good footwork, hands, soft hands, and a strong arm. So you can always kind of judge and gauge by that. And a lot of people, think it's a slap if a young kid is told to go play the outfield. And that's ridiculous. The reality is at the end of the day, you're cut out to play the outfield. Some of the fastest players in the game are center fielders. Get out there and learn the position, because it's likely you're going to be in the outfield for a long time. So, we talked a lot about specialization in sport. I think we hit on specialization in position like we just talked about. And some of the quirky or unique training techniques now and in the future, I think where it's going is like there is no silly, stupid thing you're doing. And I think I mentioned yoga and I mentioned swimming and stuff like this. I mean, gymnastics, dance, whatever. I mean, these are things when I was growing up you would have been laughed at. I didn't know what yoga was. I never, to this day, haven't learned how to swim, but I know I've tried it, and it's an amazing aerobic exercise that has functionality, whether it's strengthening in the lats or the shoulder capsules or whatever, endurance, stamina, cardio. I know it's beneficial to baseball. So I'm more interested now getting my kid into that. Stretching, explosive training, speed training. And nowhere in there did I say sign up for the track and field team, or because he can be doing that on his own now. And you don't need to play 2 or 3 or 4 sports in high school just to be recruited or drafted or play at the next level. Focus on what you're good at and, seek what you need outside of that sport. But that doesn't necessarily mean having to, go play another sport. Experimentation's a big part. Experiment with things. Try things. Go take a dance class. But no one's going to do that because it's silly and you get laughed at by your friends. But the reality is, I'd rather have my kid doing gymnastics and yoga and swimming if he's a baseball player and he's high level than being the sixth man on the basketball team, or running around, playing some other sport that it's a dead end road and he's just doing it to say he's doing something at those times of the year. I'd rather him doing more beneficial stuff like we talked about. So I think I covered it, pretty well. I think I shed some light on it. And, feedback and comments are welcome. And that's all I got.